What if Myrcella Baratheon was fostered at Winterfell? What if a single word, spoken in a firelit solar in the far north, could bend the entire arc of a kingdom? What if a mother's fear, dressed up as a gesture of trust, planted a seed that no one in that room could yet recognize? What if the Game of Thrones turned not on a sword or a poison cup, but on the fostering of a girl too young to understand the board she had just been set upon? Consider the room itself. Winterfell's great keep, thick-walled against a cold that southern lords have never truly known. King Robert Baratheon sprawls in a chair too small for his bulk, wine in his fist, grief and nostalgia making him sentimental. Across from him sits Eddard Stark, the newly named Hand of the King, a man who has already begun to feel the weight of a chain he never wished to wear. Between them lies an old friendship, and friendships, Robert believes, are best secured with blood. Bind the houses, marry the children, make of the 7 kingdoms one great family, so that the wars of his youth need never come again. Joffrey to Sansa. That is the first move, and it is made quickly, almost carelessly, the way Robert makes most of his decisions. But the second move does not come from the king at all. It comes from the queen. Cersei Lannister has been listening from the edges of the conversation, and Cersei always listens. She has spent her life reading rooms, reading men, reading the small tightenings at the corners of mouths that betray what words conceal. She senses something in King's Landing, something coiled and waiting in that nest of vipers she calls home, and she has begun, quietly, to calculate. If the capital is a place of danger, then a child removed from the capital is a child made safe. And if the Starks are to be bound to the crown, why not bind them twice? Why not leave a hostage in reverse? A royal daughter placed into Stark keeping, so that House Stark must think very carefully before it ever raises a hand against a house whose child sleeps beneath its roof. She frames it as trust. That is the elegance of it. Let Myrcella be fostered here, she says, and her voice is smooth as poured silver, in the care of Lady Stark. What greater proof of our faith in the North than to give the North our daughter? Watch how the words land. Ned Stark hears honor in them. Robert hears sentiment, and it pleases him. This notion that a Baratheon child will grow strong in the same halls where he once ran wild with Ned as boys. Catelyn Stark, seated to the side, hears something colder underneath, but she cannot yet name it. And Cersei, who has spoken, reveals nothing at all. Her face is a still pond. The lioness does not show her teeth when the prey is agreeing to walk into the den. Ned does not want to go south. Every instinct in him warns against it. But duty is the chain he cannot break, and duty tells him that to refuse Robert now would be to insult the man who names him brother. If he must leave his home, if he must ride toward a city he distrusts, then let there be a reason to keep the crown's eyes turned kindly toward Winterfell. A royal child in his wife's care is a thread that binds the king's affection to the North. He agrees. He does not finish weighing the risks. He does not need to. The decision is already made in his heart, made the moment he accepted the hand's chain. And Catelyn Tully, who has spent years mistrusting the Golden family from the south, now finds herself charged with raising one of its cubs. She lies awake that night turning it over. A Lannister child at her table. A Lannister child taught her prayers, tucked into northern furs, watched by northern eyes. She knows what the offer is worth in the ledger of politics. A princess in the household is a shield and a bargaining piece all at once. She accepts it, because refusing would cost more than accepting, but she cannot fully silence the small voice that asks what it will mean, years hence, to have loved a lion. The farewell comes at dawn, in the yard, with breath steaming in the frozen air. Cersei kneels before her daughter, and for a moment, something almost human moves across that guarded face. She grips Myrcella's small shoulders. She speaks low, so that no Stark may hear. "Trust no one here," she says. "Not the lady, not her children, not the servants who smile at you. You are a lion. Do not forget it, whatever they teach you, whatever they feed you. You are mine, and you are a lion." The girl says nothing. She is frightened and quiet, too young for the weight being placed upon her, understanding only that her mother is leaving, and that these gray walls will now be her world. She does not cry. Cersei has taught her that much already. She stands very straight as the royal party mounts, and the great column begins to move. The King's Road takes them south. It takes Ned. It takes Sansa, radiant with the dream of a prince. It takes Arya, restless and unaware. And it leaves behind, standing alone in the shadow of a castle built by the first men, a small, golden-haired child, now in the keeping of House Stark. The gate has not yet closed. The dust of the departing horses still hangs in the cold air, and already the board has changed shape, though not a single soul in that yard yet knows it. What if a child, raised to see the world as prey and predator, were placed among wolves and told to survive? What if the survival she was taught proved useless against the thing she had never been given tools to fight? Kindness. The first weeks are cold in every sense. Myrcella keeps to her chambers, a small figure in southern silks that do nothing against the northern chill. She refuses the food that is brought to her: blood sausage and black bread, venison thick with fat, ale where she expected wine. She pushes the plates away untouched, and the servants carry them out again, and each refusal is a small act of loyalty to a mother now hundreds of miles distant. She is a lion. She does not forget it. She holds the word against her chest, like a talisman in the dark. But loyalty, held long enough in silence, begins to feel less like strength and more like exile. The household does not know what to make of her. Rickon, wild as the wind off the moors, treats her as an obstacle to be run around. The other children move in their own orbits, and the girl remains at the edge, watching, calculating, waiting for the cruelty her mother promised. It does not come. That is the first thing that unsettles her. She has been armed for hostility and finds only indifference, and indifference is a weapon she was never trained to parry. It is Catelyn who changes the shape of things. She summons Maester Luwin and speaks to him plainly. The girl is a ward, she says, not a hostage, and she will be treated as one. She will sit at the family table. She will take her lessons alongside Bran and the others. Whatever her name, she is a child, and Winterfell does not starve children for the sins of their house. Luwin inclines his head. The order is given. And so Myrcella is drawn, slowly and against her own resistance, into the daily rhythm of a house that will not perform the villainy she expects. Then Bran falls. The boy who climbs the towers of Winterfell like a squirrel, who is warned and warned again, and never listens, is found broken beneath the first keep. And the girl who has been taught that danger is something her family wields against others, watches, for the first time, what danger looks like when it strikes a home. She sees Catelyn at the bedside, sleepless, hollow-eyed, refusing to leave. She sees Robb, heir to the north, young and frightened, and trying not to show it. This is not the calculated cruelty of the South. This is grief, raw and unguarded, and it does not fit the story her mother told her. And then, in the dark, the man comes with the knife. The assassin means to finish what the fall began. He is stopped, barely, bloodily, and in the aftermath, the castle turns to fear and suspicion, and Myrcella lies awake in her chamber, listening to the running footsteps and the raised voices, and she thinks a thought that no 7-year-old should have to think. Someone wanted the boy dead. Someone paid a man to slit the throat of a child in his sickbed, and the girl, who has been told to trust no one here, finds herself wondering for the first time whether the danger she should fear comes from Winterfell at all. She thinks of her mother's letters. They come by Raven, warm and full of instruction, telling her to be brave, to remember her blood, to trust no wolf. And Myrcella reads them and feels something she cannot name curdle in her chest. The letters do not ask how she is. They do not ask what she has seen. They tell her what to be. And the girl, watching Catelyn weep over a boy who is not hers by blood, but is loved beyond reason, begins, quietly, without deciding to distrust the hand that writes to her from the South. She goes to Bran. No one sends her. She simply appears at his bedside one gray afternoon with a book under her arm, and she sits, and she reads to the sleeping boy in a small, clear voice. She reads of knights and dragons and northern kings of winter. She returns the next day, and the next, and Maester Luwin, passing in the corridor, pauses to watch her through the doorway and says nothing. But he marks it. He marks all of it. Later he speaks to Catelyn in her solar, choosing his words with the care of a man who has weighed them. The girl is not what he expected, he tells her. She is gentle. She seeks to soothe, not to wound. She is nothing like the accounts they have heard of her elder brother, the Crown Prince, whose cruelties are whispered even this far north. Whatever the sins of her house, they do not seem to live in her. Catelyn listens, and something in her face softens by a degree it has not softened in weeks. This girl did not push my son from that tower, she thinks. This girl reads to him while he sleeps, and the thought, once admitted, cannot be unthought. Slowly, without ceremony, the girl begins to call the place home. Not aloud, not yet, but the word forms in her mind, where once there had been only cold and distance. And in the rookery above them all, the ravens keep coming, black wings against a whitening sky, carrying news from the south, news of a hand fallen ill, of a queen's displeasure, of tensions drawing tight as a bowstring between wolf and lion. Catelyn reads the latest by candlelight, and her fingers tighten on the parchment. What if a single raven, no heavier than a child's hand, could carry the weight of a kingdom folded into its talons? The parchment Catelyn holds does not tremble, but her fingers do, and she reads the words twice, 3 times, as though repetition might soften them into something other than what they are. Robert Baratheon is dead. Eddard Stark, Hand of the King, has been named a traitor and thrown into the black cells beneath the Red Keep. The words do not change. They never do. She goes to Robb before the household stirs, and she finds him already awake, already dressed, because word travels through a castle the way water travels through cracks in stone, quietly, and everywhere at once. He is a boy of 15 holding a lord's burden in hands that have not yet learned their own strength. He reads the letter. He sets it down. He does not speak for a long moment, and in that silence, Catelyn watches her son become something colder and harder than the child she raised. Consider the arithmetic of his position. His father imprisoned, his sisters somewhere in the capital's grip, his king dead, and a Lannister queen ascendant, and within his own walls, sleeping in a chamber down the corridor from his crippled brother, a golden-haired girl of the very house that has taken everything, Myrcella Baratheon, or, as the whispers already name her, Myrcella Lannister, the hostage he did not know he held until the moment holding her became the only card left on the table. If you're enjoying this alternate history of Westeros so far, please consider subscribing. I upload new stories every single day. Now, let's continue with the story. The bannermen gather in the Great Hall as the news spreads, and they come with the smell of the cold on their cloaks and old blood in their memory. The Great John Umber speaks first, because the Great John always speaks first, his voice a rock slide filling the hall. "Chain the girl," he says. "Chain her, and send word to the lioness that if she wants her cub to keep her fingers and her fair skin, she will hand back the Warden of the North unharmed." It is leverage, he says. It is the only leverage they have, and half the hall growls its agreement, because these are men who understand hostages the way they understand the weather, as a thing to be used before it turns against you. Robb listens. This is the first lesson of lordship, and he learns it in real time. A lord listens even to counsel he means to refuse. He lets the Great John finish. He lets the muttering settle, and then he says, quietly, that he will not chain a child. The words land strangely in that hall of hard men. He explains himself, though he need not. "She was fostered here in good faith," he says. "She has sat at my mother's table. She has read to my brother. And if we become the sort of men who put children in irons to bargain for our own, then what exactly are we saving my father to return to?" He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. The refusal is absolute, and everyone in the room hears the iron beneath the softness of it. But he is not a fool, and mercy is not the same as blindness. He orders her placed under close guard. Not the black cells, never that, but watched, always. Her chamber door manned, her movements known, her freedom narrowed to the width of a single corridor. It is a compromise that satisfies no one fully, which is precisely how Catelyn knows it is the correct one. The Great John subsides, not convinced but obedient. The pieces have moved, the board has changed shape, and down the corridor, behind the door that now has a guard beside it, Myrcella understands what has happened before anyone comes to tell her. She has learned to read the castle too. She has felt the change in the air, the way footsteps quicken and voices drop, the way the guard was not there yesterday and is there now. When they finally explain it to her, gently, because they are gentle here, even now, she does not weep at first. She sits very still. She thinks of her father, whom she has been told is dead, and finds she cannot summon much grief, because he was never truly hers. She thinks of Lord Eddard in a cell, this stern, quiet man who nodded to her in the yard, and she finds the grief comes easily for him, and then she understands the full shape of it. She is a hostage. She was always a hostage. The kindness was real, but so were the walls, and now the walls have shown themselves. So she does the only thing left to a girl with no army and no crown and no power but the accident of her own blood. She asks for parchment and ink, and she writes to her mother. The letter is not the letter a lioness's daughter is supposed to write. She does not demand rescue. She does not threaten. She begs. She begs her mother to spare Lord Eddard Stark, to release him, to let there be no war. And in the begging, she reveals the thing she has not yet admitted even to herself. She writes that these people have been kind to her. She writes that she does not want them harmed. She has come, without meaning to, without permission, to love the family that holds her captive, and the love bleeds through every line no matter how she tries to keep it out. She seals it. She hands it to the maester. And as the raven lifts into the whitening morning sky, black wings beating southward toward the woman who will read it, Myrcella Baratheon understands at last that her small hands now hold 2 houses knotted together in blood, and that whatever she has written, the knot will not come loose without cutting. She does not know yet what her mother will do. Neither does anyone. Consider what a boy of 15 must weigh when the raven arrives from King's Landing, carrying the news that his father is a prisoner of the crown. Robb Stark reads the letter once, and then a second time, slower, as though the words might rearrange themselves into something survivable. They do not. His father sits in a dungeon beneath the Red Keep. His father, who taught him that a lord who passes the sentence should swing the sword, now waits upon the mercy of a boy king and a queen who has none. And Robb, who has never fought a battle, who has never led men to their deaths, understands in that moment that the North will bleed, whether he wishes it or not. So he does the only thing a Stark can do. He calls the banners. They come. From the mountains and the wolfswood, from the white knife and the stony shore, the lords of the north answer the summons, and the yards of Winterfell fill with horses and steel and the low, steady murmur of men, preparing to die for a cause they trust more than they understand. Myrcella watches them gather from the covered bridge, small and pale against the gray morning, and she does not weep, because she has learned that weeping changes nothing in a place like this. Robb finds her before he rides. He does not have to. 1,000 small errands press upon him, and none of them is a golden-haired girl who is not his kin. But he goes to her anyway. He speaks plainly, because plainness is the only kindness he knows how to offer. He tells her that she is safe within these walls. He tells her that her safety does not depend upon her mother's goodwill, nor upon her uncle's sword, nor upon the fortunes of the war he is about to wage. It depends upon him, and he will not harm her, he says. Whatever the great lords decide, whatever letters fly between them, whatever the fields of the riverlands are made to swallow, she is a guest of Winterfell. She will remain a guest of Winterfell. He does not say hostage. He knows the word, and so does she. And the fact that he refuses to use it tells her more than any oath could. Then he mounts, and he is gone, and the gates close behind 20,000 men, and the castle is suddenly, terribly quiet. Catelyn Stark departs separately, southward and west, to treat with the brothers of the dead king, with Renly who has crowned himself, and Stannis who insists the crown was always his. She leaves Winterfell in the keeping of a broken-legged boy and a captive girl, and this arrangement, absurd on its face, becomes in the coming weeks the strange still center of a war that spins outward from it in widening rings of consequence. For consider what the North's early victories do to the calculus of every lord watching. Robb Stark wins in the Riverlands. He wins at the Green Fork, or seems to, drawing Tywin's host to the wrong bank while the true blow falls elsewhere. And at the Whispering Wood, beneath a canopy of dark leaves, the young wolf catches the Kingslayer himself. Jaime Lannister, the finest sword in the Seven Kingdoms, the Queen's twin, the Boy King's uncle, is dragged from his horse and bound and made a prisoner. And now the board has changed. Now the North holds a lion of the blood, and the crown holds a wolf. And somewhere in the middle sits a girl in Winterfell whom almost no one has remembered to account for. Tywin Lannister does not forget her. Word reaches him in his command tent, delivered by a rider whose news he has waited weeks to hear, and the old lion sits very still as he absorbs it. His granddaughter is a ward of Winterfell. His granddaughter is in the hands of the boy who now holds his son. He does not curse. He does not throw the letter into the brazier, though a lesser man might. He simply recalculates, because a hostage in the enemy's keep is not merely a life to be ransomed. It is a knife pointed at every threat he might otherwise make, and Tywin Lannister has built his legend on the credibility of his threats. The girl complicates everything. He files this away, cold and precise. Another factor in a sum that grows more tangled by the day. Within Winterfell's walls, the girl herself knows nothing of these calculations. She knows only that her father is dead and her uncle is a prisoner, and that the men who did these things sleep beneath the same roof as she. She grows quiet. She grows pale. She stops coming to the great hall for meals, and when Bran finds her, she is sitting in the cold of the Godswood, staring at the red weirwood as though it might answer questions no living thing will. He does not know what to say, so he tells her stories, the old ones, of the Long Night and the others, of Brandon the Builder and the Kings of Winter, of the children of the forest who sang the songs of earth. She listens because it is easier than thinking, and somewhere in the telling, two children who have no power over anything make a promise to one another, small and solemn and utterly sincere. Whatever the great lords decide, they will protect each other. Bran means it with his whole heart. Myrcella means it too, and does not yet know that a raven is even now beating northward, carrying an answer to the letter she thought no one would heed. What if a letter could stop a sword? What if the plea of an 11-year-old girl, penned in careful hand and sent across 1,000 miles, could stay the hand of a king? It cannot. This is the first lesson of the game, and it is the cruelest one, because the raven that beats northward does not carry mercy. It carries the news of the steps of the Sept of Baelor, where Eddard Stark, Warden of the North, Lord of Winterfell, was made to kneel before the great Sept and confess to treasons he never committed. And the boy king, who has all the power and none of the wisdom, who was begged by his own mother and counseled by every adviser with a mind for consequence, who had before him the words of his sister asking only that the man be spared for the sake of the girl who lived beneath his roof, chooses the sword. He does not choose it out of strategy. He chooses it because he can. This is the thing that no letter could account for. Myrcella wrote to a brother she believed capable of restraint. She wrote to the idea of Joffrey, not the reality of him, and the reality of him is a blade descending in the September sun, watched by a screaming crowd, watched by two Stark daughters who will never be the same. When the word reaches Winterfell, it does not come gently. It comes as ravens come, all at once, from too many quarters. And Myrcella, who had begun to hope, who had allowed herself to believe her small, careful act had mattered, learns that it did not. She learns that her name meant nothing, that her plea was read and set aside, that her brother, her blood, her king, chose cruelty over the single reasonable thing she had asked of him. She does not weep in the way children weep. She goes still. There is a difference, and Catelyn Stark, who has buried more grief than any woman should, recognizes it at once. This is the stillness of betrayal, not by a stranger, by her own. And beneath it, cold and rising, is a fear so precise it might have been calculated. If the Starks are to have vengeance, they need not send it 1,000 miles south. It sleeps beneath their own roof. It has golden hair and Lannister eyes. It is her. In the great hall, the bannermen think as she fears. They come to Robb Stark, who has just been proclaimed king in the north, who has an army at his back and grief in his heart, and they press upon him the oldest arithmetic of war, a life for a life. The North paid in blood, let the South pay likewise. There is a Lannister here, they remind him, a daughter of the Queen. Cut her throat and send the pieces to King's Landing, or keep her and ransom her, and make the Lannisters bleed gold for the girl they should have traded for a father. It is a tempting equation. It is also a trap, and Catelyn sees the shape of it before her son does. She rises, this woman who has more reason than any to want a Lannister dead, and she says the thing that will define the war to come. Kill a child, she tells them, and you become the thing you are fighting. Joffrey murdered a good man on the steps of a sept for the pleasure of the crowd. If the North answers by murdering a girl who did nothing but be born, then there is no difference between Winterfell and the golden monster on the Iron Throne. The moral high ground is not a luxury. It is a weapon. It is the difference between a rebellion and a slaughter, between a king men will follow to their deaths and a butcher they will abandon at the first defeat. Robb listens. He is young, and he is grieving, and there is a part of him that wants the simplest answer more than he will ever admit. But he is his father's son, and his mother's, and he understands what she is offering him. Not mercy for mercy's sake. Legitimacy. He decrees it before the hall. Myrcella Baratheon remains under the protection of House Stark. No harm will come to her. Any man who touches her answers to the king in the north. And then something happens that no bannerman anticipated. Something that shifts the board in a way no strategist could have arranged. Myrcella comes into the hall. She has heard, somehow, in the way castles carry every whisper, and she walks the length of that cold stone chamber under the eyes of men who wanted her dead, and she kneels before Catelyn, before Bran in his chair, before the whole grieving court of the north. She disavows him, her brother, her king. She says that what Joffrey did was monstrous, that Lord Eddard was a good man and a just lord, that she is ashamed to share blood with the boy who killed him. And she asks, not as a hostage, not as a pawn, but as a girl who was chosen, to be taken as a true ward of Winterfell, to be a Stark by fostering if she cannot be one by blood. The hall is silent. The bannermen who came to demand her death find they have nothing to say to a child who has just severed herself from everything she was born to be. Catelyn looks at her for a long moment, weighing the sincerity of it, weighing the girl, and in that silence, a raven from White Harbor arrives, bearing news that will make the question of Myrcella's loyalty far more urgent than anyone in that hall yet understands. What if the most dangerous news in a war traveled not by sword, but by whisper, carried on the wings of a bird across half a continent, to land in the hands of the one man least surprised to receive it? Far to the south, in the vast and blackened ruin of Harrenhal, Tywin Lannister reads that his granddaughter lives, that she is unharmed, that the Starks, who had every cause and every right to answer Joffrey's butchery of their lord, with blood of their own, have instead let a Lannister child grow safe within their walls. He reads this twice. He sets the parchment down upon the great scarred table before him, and for the length of one long breath, the Warden of the West permits himself something he permits himself almost never: relief. It moves across his face like a shadow and is gone before any servant might mark it. She lives. That is the fact around which everything must now be arranged. Tywin does not think as other men think. Where another lord might feel gratitude, he feels calculation stirring. The Starks have shown mercy, and mercy, to Tywin Lannister, is not a virtue. It is a lever. He turns it over in his mind the way a jeweler turns a stone to the light. A child of his blood held in the north, unharmed, is a wound to Lannister pride only if he permits it to be read that way. But it is also something else. It is proof, to be shouted from every keep and market square between Casterly Rock and King's Landing, that the wolves of Winterfell are soft, that they had a high-born girl at their mercy and lacked the stomach to use her. Weakness, he will call it. He will not call it what he privately knows it to be, which is discipline, which is honor, which is precisely the sort of thing that has always made the Starks such tiresome and formidable enemies. There is Jaime to consider, his son, taken at the Whispering Wood, held now by the boy who calls himself king in the north, a prisoner for a prisoner, a kingslayer for a princess. The trade suggests itself the moment he thinks of it, clean and symmetrical, the kind of bargain that ends nothing but purchases time. And time, Tywin knows, is the only currency in a war that has not yet found its shape. He does not decide, not yet. He simply lets the pieces settle into their positions on the board of his mind, and he waits to see which of them his enemies will move first. In King's Landing, there is no such stillness. Cersei receives the same news, and where her father found relief that curdled swiftly into strategy, she finds only wreckage. Her daughter is alive. That should be joy. It should be the single warm thing in a season of cold, and for the first moment it is. Then comes the rest of it, delivered by a trembling messenger who would rather be anywhere in the world than in this room. That Myrcella has knelt before the Stark court, that she has named Joffrey a monster before the assembled banners of the north, that she has asked, of her own will, to be made a ward of Winterfell, a Stark by fostering. Cersei does not scream. That is the terrible part. She goes very quiet, and her hands find the arms of her chair, and her knuckles go white as bone. "They have taken her," she says at last. Not stolen, not slain, taken. Ned Stark's widow and that crippled boy have reached into her family and turned her own blood against her, and that is a thing Cersei cannot forgive and cannot comprehend, because in all her calculations, she never once imagined her daughter might simply choose. She sends for Tyrion, her brother, her enemy, the imp she despises, who now sits as hand of the king, with the chain of office cold upon his shoulders, and she tells him, in a voice stripped down to its rawest wire, to bring Myrcella home, at any cost. Whatever must be given, give it. Whatever must be promised, promise it. Only bring her back before the North finishes making her into something Cersei will not recognize. Tyrion listens. He says little. He has learned that with Cersei, silence is often the wiser answer, and besides, his mind is already elsewhere, already moving. Because Tyrion sees what his sister cannot bear to see. A child raised among wolves, he thinks, may in time grow to howl. Myrcella in the north is not a wound to be closed by ransom. She is a symbol, and symbols do not travel home in a wheelhouse. If the girl has truly chosen the Starks, then dragging her south by force would only prove every word Tywin means to spread about Lannister cruelty, and it would break something in Myrcella that no marriage or crown could mend. But if she is beloved of the North, if she is trusted there, then she is also something rare and valuable. She is a bridge. She is a marriage waiting to be made. A daughter of two houses who might, with the right words spoken at the right table, become the seam that stitches a torn realm back together. He does not say this to Cersei. She would not hear it. He simply bows and promises to do what can be done, and leaves her to her grief and her fury. And as he descends the narrow stair from the Queen's chambers, wine already turning in his thoughts alongside far more sober things, Tyrion begins to draw the shape of a plan, a marriage, an alliance, an ending to a war that has scarcely begun. He will need to write a letter. He pauses on the stair and considers to whom. The letter, as it happens, would arrive too late. For while Tyrion sat on his stair and considered the shape of peace, the North was already coming apart, at a seam no one in King's Landing had thought to watch. Consider the position of Theon Greyjoy on the morning he takes Winterfell. He has perhaps 30 men. He holds a castle built to withstand 10,000. He has betrayed the boy who called him brother, and he has done it not for gain, but for the approval of a father who despises him. And somewhere beneath the iron, he has wrapped around his heart. Theon knows this. He knows it the way a man knows a wound he refuses to look at. And into this fragile, dangerous moment walks a problem he never planned for. A Lannister princess, standing in the yard of a castle he has just stolen, watching him with the flat, unimpressed eyes of a girl who has spent 7 years learning exactly how to hide what she feels. What does a man do with a princess he cannot afford to keep and cannot afford to kill? Theon calculates. He is not clever, but he is not stupid, and even in the fever of his triumph, he understands the arithmetic. Myrcella Baratheon is a Lannister by blood, and Tywin Lannister does not forgive harm done to his own. To touch her is to invite an army. To free her is to lose a card he does not yet know how to play. So he does the only thing that keeps her useful and keeps him alive. He keeps her. He calls her guest, and he means prisoner, and both of them know the difference, and neither of them says it aloud. But there is another calculation running beneath the surface of that day, and it belongs to Myrcella. When Theon demands to know where Bran and Rickon have gone, when he stands in the great hall with the whole weight of his stolen authority pressing down on the question, Myrcella lies. She lies smoothly, without hesitation, the way she has watched her mother lie 100 times, except she turns the weapon around. She tells him they fled south toward the King's Road, toward the safety of banners loyal to their mother. She sends him hunting in the wrong direction, and she does this knowing that if the lie is discovered, she has traded away the single thing that keeps her breathing. She has told a lie no Lannister prisoner needed to tell. She has spent her own safety to buy the freedom of 2 Stark boys hidden in the crypts beneath her feet, and she has done it without being asked. And she has done it because somewhere in these long northern years, she stopped being her mother's daughter and became something else entirely. Theon rides out. He finds nothing, and when he returns, humiliated and desperate, with his father's contempt echoing in his skull and his men whispering that they should never have come, he makes the choice that will damn him. 2 boys from the mill, 2 innocents whose only crime is being the right age and the right size. He burns them and hangs them from the gate, and calls them Bran and Rickon, because a lord who has lost his prisoners is weak, and a lord who has murdered his enemies' sons is feared. And Theon has confused the two so thoroughly that he cannot tell them apart anymore. Myrcella sees the bodies. She sees the tar-black shapes swaying above the gate, and she knows they are not the boys she loves, and she knows that Theon knows it too, and she says nothing, because to name the lie would be to unravel her own. She stands in the cold, and she looks at what desperation makes of a man, and she understands, with a clarity that will never leave her, exactly what she has escaped. This is the world she was born into. This is what fear does when it is dressed in a lord's furs, and she has already chosen. She chose in the crypt with a lie on her tongue. She will choose again. The choosing comes faster than anyone expects, for Winterfell is not held by strength, but by fear, and fear is a coin that spends quickly. When the men of the Dreadfort come, when Ramsay Snow's soldiers pour through the gates under the promise of rescue and reveal themselves as something far worse, the castle does not fall so much as dissolve. Fire in the towers, screaming in the yard, Theon's Ironborn cut down where they stand, and the thin order he imposed, shattering into smoke and blood, and the particular chaos that comes when the wolves and the flayed men are indistinguishable in the dark, and in that chaos, Myrcella is not forgotten. Two of the household servants, old men who have served House Stark since before she was born, who watched her grow from a frightened southern child into a girl the North had claimed as its own, find her in the confusion of the burning yard. They do not ask whether it is wise. They do not weigh the risk of shielding a Lannister princess while a castle dies around them. They simply take her by the arm and pull her toward the postern gate, because she is theirs now, because loyalty in the North runs downward as well as up, and a ward of Winterfell does not get left to burn. She goes with them into the dark, past the bodies, past the flames climbing the broken keep, out toward the Black Hills and a distant holdfast where loyal men might still be found. Behind her, Winterfell is dying. Ahead of her, she does not yet know, but she runs north. She runs, always, north. What is a hostage worth when the castle that held her has crumbled to ash? This is the question Tyrion Lannister turns over in his mind as the reports reach him in King's Landing, fragmentary and contradictory, arriving faster than he can reconcile them. Winterfell burned, the Boltons turned, the Ironborn scattered, and somewhere in that ruin, a girl with golden hair has vanished into the northern dark, protected not by armies but by two old men who chose her without being asked. Tyrion reads these words twice, then a third time, and something in him shifts, slow and deliberate, like a stone settling into place. She is alive. That is the first calculation. The second is more subtle, more dangerous, and it is this: she is no longer merely a Lannister in Stark hands. She has become something the game does not usually permit. A bridge, a living seam stitched across the wound between two houses that have spent a war teaching each other to bleed. Tyrion understands hostages. He understands their arithmetic, their cold utility, the way they can be spent or lost or bartered like coin. But this is different. This girl was fostered, not captured. She grew among wolves, and the men who saved her did so not for ransom, but for love, which is a currency no ledger in the capital knows how to count. So he writes, He drafts the letter himself, dismissing the maester, choosing each word as a man might choose stones to cross a river. An offer of peace. Myrcella returned, safe and whole, to the family that made her. In exchange, an end to the war. Recognition of the North as a kingdom governed by its own king. And, binding all of it, a marriage, a union, to knit the broken thing back together so that it might never break the same way twice. He seals it. He sends it north with envoys who ride, knowing that half the roads between here and there are held by men who would kill them for their boots. He does not expect an easy answer. He expects, instead, a beginning. In the north, the letter finds Robb Stark in a hall that smells of tallow and wet wool. His lords gathered close, his mother seated apart. The offer is read aloud, and the silence that follows it is not peace but its opposite, a held breath, a coiled thing. Peace, recognition. Everything they have fought and starved and buried men to win, offered freely, in exchange for a girl. And there is the trap of it, sharp and clean. For the girl in question is not a bargaining chip to Robb Stark. She is the child who read to Rickon by the fire. She is the ward who threw herself between his brothers and the iron-born blades, who bought them their lives with her own defiance. The North does not surrender its own. Catelyn watches her son wrestle with it, and she, of all people, knows the shape of the wound he carries. For she has already made her own desperate wager. She has freed the Kingslayer, unclasped his chains in the dead of night, and sent him south with a sworn sword, gambling her honor and her son's cause against the faint hope of getting Sansa and Arya back alive. She did it for daughters she cannot reach, and now she sits in the ruin of that choice, understanding, too late, what it has cost. Jaime Lannister was the great counterweight. With him gone, Myrcella is all the leverage the Starks have left. One girl against the whole grinding weight of the war. Robb sees it. He is no longer the boy who rode south. He weighs the offer as a king must weigh it. The lives it might save, the winter it might outlast, the sons who might come home to their mothers, if only he signs his name and gives her back. It is, by any cold reckoning, the wisest thing he could do, and that is precisely why he hesitates. Because wisdom that requires him to trade away a child who trusts him is not a wisdom he wants. They bring her before him. She has ridden hard from the holdfast where the old men hid her, and she is thinner than he remembers, her southern softness burned away by the year. She stands in the hall and she does not weep. When Robb tells her, plainly, that her uncle has offered peace for her return, she is quiet for a long moment. Then she speaks, and her voice does not shake. She tells him she does not wish to go back. She tells him what waits for her in King's Landing, a mother who loved her as an ornament, and a brother who loved nothing at all. She tells him that in all her life, the only people who ever stood between her and harm were the ones in this room, the ones who had every reason to hate her and chose instead to shield her. The Starks, she says, are the only family that ever protected her, and she would rather remain in a broken castle among wolves than return whole to a golden cage. The words land in the hall like a verdict. Robb feels the last of his hesitation burn away. He rises. He sends his answer south, not as a rejection of peace, but as a redefinition of it. Myrcella will not be traded. She will not be spent or surrendered or handed back like a debt repaid. She will remain in the North, and one day, of her own choosing, in her own time, she may wed to seal a true peace between the realms. Not a hostage returned, a daughter claimed. And as the raven lifts into the gray northern sky, Robb knows he has just told the lions that some things are not for sale. What if a single vow, made and broken in the dark of a river camp, could unravel a kingdom that had won every battle it fought? The young wolf had never lost upon the field. He had shattered armies, taken lords captive, humbled the greatest house in Westeros. And yet the thing that would destroy him was not a sword. It was a promise made to an old man on a bridge, and then quietly, tenderly, catastrophically set aside. Jane Westerling was not a schemer. That is what makes it so cruel. She was a girl who tended a wounded king through fever and grief, and Robb Stark, in a moment of tenderness and guilt, married her to protect her honor. A decent act, a ruinous one, because he had already pledged himself to a daughter of House Frey, and Walder Frey does not forget a slight. He counts them, he hoards them the way a miser hoards coin, and he waits. Consider the arithmetic of the old man at the Twins. Here is a lord who commands the only crossing that matters, who was promised a marriage and given an insult, who watched a king ride south on his bridge and then discard the bargain that bought the passage. What is such a man owed, and who, precisely, is willing to pay it? Roose Bolton knows the answer. Rose Bolton has known it for some time. The Leech Lord thinks in ledgers of blood. He watches Robb's cause weaken, watches the Westerlands campaign stall, watches the alliance with the Freys curdle, and he calculates. A wolf who cannot win, cannot protect. And a bannerman's loyalty, in Bolton's cold accounting, extends precisely as far as the wolf's ability to reward it, and no further. He begins to correspond with those in the south who would welcome a betrayal. He weighs the value of the boy king against the value of what the Lannisters and Tyrells might offer a man willing to end him. The scales tip. They were always going to tip. But mark this. Mark the one variable that both plotters overlook because it is not upon their board at all. Myrcella Baratheon is not with the host. She does not ride south with Robb toward the Twins. She remains in a northern holdfast, far from the rivers, sheltered behind gray walls, because Robb would not risk the girl he had claimed as kin on a march through hostile country. A precaution, an afterthought, almost, and it will prove the difference between the extinction of a bond and its survival. The wedding is arranged with terrible courtesy. Walder Frey offers his hospitality, his salt and bread, his forgiveness dressed as feast. Robb, needing the crossing, needing the Freys, accepts. He brings his mother, he brings his lords and his men, and the trust that guest right has protected for 8,000 years. Rose Bolton wears his cleanest smile, and beneath the tables, the crossbowmen wait. What happens at the Twins does not need to be described in detail, because the horror of it lies not in the blood, but in the arithmetic that produced it. A vow broken, a debt claimed, a guest law violated by men who had decided that a wolf too weak to win was a wolf too dangerous to keep alive. Catelyn Stark, who had held this fragile enterprise together with her grief and her will, dies in a hall gone red. Robb, the boy who never lost a battle, loses everything in a room where he carried no sword. The North is not defeated. The North is murdered. The news travels north as all such news does, faster than any horse, carried in whispers and cut throats, and the sudden silence of ravens that stop arriving. When it reaches the holdfast where Myrcella sleeps behind gray stone, it reaches her not as a political development, but as a wound. She had chosen these people. She had stood in Robb's hall, and named them the only family that ever shielded her, and now that family lies scattered across a riverland floor, and the world she selected over her golden birthright has collapsed in a single night of treachery. She does not weep as a Lannister weeps, coldly and for advantage. She weeps as a daughter, and that grief, genuine and total, is the thing that will one day make her precious to those who survive. Now the board rearranges itself with brutal speed. Roose Bolton is named Warden of the North, cloaked in the false authority of having ended a traitor king. Winterfell, or what remains of it, passes into hands that never loved it, and a girl of Lannister blood, sheltered in a northern holdfast, becomes overnight the most valuable and most vulnerable piece left standing. To the Boltons, she is a prize to be seized, a hostage worth her weight in gold and leverage both. To the Lannisters, she is a daughter to be reclaimed. To the loyal Stark retainers who guard her, she is something else entirely. She is the last living link to the family they served, a girl the young wolf called kin, and they will not let the flayed men take her. They move by night, a handful of grim northern men who understand that everything they know has ended, bundling the girl onto a horse and turning east, away from the Boltons, away from the ruin, toward the one great power in the north that has not spoken its heart aloud. White Harbor, House Manderly, whose fatness and feasting conceal a loyalty to the Starks that runs deeper than any in the realm suspects. The riders do not tell Myrcella where they go. They tell her only to be silent and to hold on. The road east is long, and the girl who rides it is not the girl who first came north years before. That child arrived soft, bright, curious, a princess who had known only the marble comforts of the Red Keep. The one who arrives at the gates of White Harbor has been carved by grief into something harder, quieter, more careful with her words. She has watched a war swallow the family that took her in. She has learned that a name that once opened every door can also become a rope around the neck. And she has learned to hold on, in the dark, and to be silent. Consider the man who receives her. Lord Wyman Manderly is enormous, so vast that he must be carried in a litter, so devoted to his food that lesser men mistake him for a joke. This is precisely what he wishes them to believe. Beneath the fat and the feasting sits a mind that misses nothing, and beneath the mind sits a grief that has not cooled. He sent his son and his men south to swear fealty and to fetch home the bones of his king, and what came back was betrayal. The phrase made merry over the murder of the Starks. Wyman Manderly has not forgotten. He smiles at the Bolton men who ride through his gates. He toasts them, and all the while he is a wall of silent fury waiting for its hour. Into this hall of hidden knives, the riders bring their charge. They expect suspicion. They receive something stranger. Manderly looks at the girl for a long moment, and the fat old lord who plays the fool sees at once what she is. Not a burden, not a Lannister to be ransomed, a symbol, a princess of the Golden Lion who stood in the courtyard of Winterfell and named her own family false, who mourned the Starks as her own, who chose the North when the North had nothing left to offer her. Men do not follow ledgers. Men follow stories. And here, delivered to his door, is a story the North has never heard before. He gives her a chamber high in the new castle, far from the docks where foreign eyes linger. His maester, a careful old man who understands that certain truths are best kept locked in the head and never committed to parchment, is told a version of events that would survive any questioning. There is no princess in White Harbor. There is a ward, a girl of no great consequence, a distant relation being sheltered from the troubles. Letters that might have named her are burned in the maester's brazier before the ink has fully dried. Manderley watches the ashes curl. He does not explain himself. He does not need to. Myrcella does not wish to be hidden away like a jewel in a box. She has spent years watching how power moves, first in the Red Keep, and then in the Great Hall of Winterfell, and she has learned that a person kept safe is a person kept useless. She comes before Lord Wyman not to beg protection, but to offer something in return. She knows the Lannisters. She knows how her mother thinks, how the small council maneuvers, which lords in the Reach and the Westerlands can be bought and which cannot. She knows the weight her own name still carries in the minds of men who have not heard she is missing. All of this she lays before the fat lord like a merchant spreading his wares, and the fat lord, who respects nothing so much as usefulness, begins to smile in earnest. Then the ships come in, and with them the news. Word travels slowly to the north, but it travels. In King's Landing, the Queen believes her daughter lost or dead, swallowed by the collapse of the North. One more casualty of a war that has consumed so many. Cersei mourns, in her way, and looks north with hatred, but she does not look for a living girl, because she does not know there is one to find. And there is more. Tywin Lannister, the great lion whose shadow fell over the whole of the realm, is dead, and it was his own son who killed him. Tyrion has fled Westeros. The family that ruled the Seven Kingdoms has turned its claws upon itself. Myrcella receives this the way she has learned to receive everything now, still and quiet, letting the weight of it settle before she speaks. Her grandfather is dead. Her uncle, the one Lannister who ever showed her true kindness, is gone across the sea, a fugitive with a price on his head. Her mother thinks her buried, and in that stillness, she understands a thing that would have broken the child she once was, and merely hardens the woman she is becoming. No one is coming for her. No rider will thunder up the King's Road to reclaim the princess. No mother will send an army. The family that made her has forgotten she exists, and it is tearing itself apart without her, which means she belongs to no one now but herself. She sits at the high window of the new castle, looking out over the gray water and the pale mists that hang above it, and Lord Wyman Manderley waits for her answer to a question he has only half asked. The North is stirring. Loyal men whisper in cellars and behind barred doors of a rebellion to bring the Starks home again. And a princess who chose the North stands at the center of it, no longer a piece being moved, but a hand reaching for the board. What if a girl, born of the Golden Lion, could become the banner of the Grey Wolf? It is the question Wyman Manderley turns over in his mind as he watches the last of his trusted lords file into the vaulted hall beneath the Merman's court. Men who have ridden through storm and suspicion to reach White Harbor unseen. He has weighed the risk of this gathering, the way a merchant weighs a cargo against the tides. If one of these men proves false, if one carries word south to the Dreadfort, then everything he has built in secret collapses in a single afternoon. He knows this. He does it anyway, because there are moments when the safe course is the losing course, and Wyman Manderley, fat and old and grieving for a murdered son, has decided he would rather lose everything than surrender it quietly. The lords do not know why they have been summoned. That is the point. He lets them wonder as the candles gutter and the doors are barred, as the servants withdraw, and the cold stone swallows the sounds of the harbor above. He speaks first of grievances they all share: the red wedding, the Bolton flaying banner flying over Winterfell, where the direwolf once ran, the Freys and their Lannister paymasters squatting in the halls of the men they slaughtered. He watches the anger kindle in weathered faces, watches hands tighten on cups, and only when the room is hot with old wrath does he play his piece. He tells them he shelters a ward, a true-born Baratheon, by every reckoning the realm accepts, a niece of the fallen King Robert, thought dead by her own mother, hidden these long years in the north. And the room goes silent in the particular way rooms go silent when men understand they are standing at the edge of something enormous. Consider what he offers them, not merely a symbol, but a legitimacy that neither Bolton nor Lannister can claim. The North distrusts both. It will not bleed for a flayed man's crown, and it will not kneel to the lions who orchestrated its butchery, but a Baratheon raised among Starks, a girl who learned her prayers before the heart tree and her letters in the Maester's Tower of Winterfell. That is a banner men might follow without swallowing their pride. Manderley has calculated this precisely. He has spent long nights reckoning the loyalties of every house from the neck to the wall, and he genuinely believes, that a princess of the North could turn whispers into war. Then Myrcella enters, and every calculation Manderley made must accommodate what she does next. She has heard him. She has stood in the shadow of the gallery above and listened as an old man arranged her future like coins on a table, and she comes down the stairs, not as a piece being positioned, but as a woman who has already decided her own worth. The lords rise. They see the Baratheon in her, the strong jaw, the height of her, though the gold of her hair betrays the lion beneath. They wait for her to accept the crown they are half prepared to offer. She refuses it. She tells them, her voice steady, her hands still, that she wants no part of the Iron Throne, that Stannis Baratheon marches even now with a claim written in law and blood, and that she will not set herself against him as a rival for Robert's legacy, because to do so would be to invite him to see her as an enemy, and she has no wish to be Stannis's enemy. She knows her Lannister blood makes her a threat in his eyes. She knows that a girl who could rally the North to Robert's memory is precisely the sort of complication a man like Stannis eliminates before it grows teeth. So she takes the danger and turns it inside out. She renounces everything: the throne, the crown, the southern game entire. She wants only one thing: justice for the family that raised her, the restoration of House Stark to Winterfell. The lords are stunned, and Manderley most of all, because he had prepared arguments for reluctance, for fear, for greedy ambition, but he had no argument ready for a girl who lays down a crown to lift up someone else's. It moves them in a way no claim to power ever could. A Baratheon who does not want to rule them, but only to serve the North's oldest cause. There is a strange purity to it that cuts through their weathered cynicism like sunlight through fog. Will Manderley weeps openly. Old Lord Locke bows his head, and in that hall beneath the harbor, the shape of the rebellion changes. It is no longer about placing a girl upon a chair. It is about wolves returning home, with a foster daughter carrying their banner. But the game does not pause for sentiment. Even as the lords swear their quiet oaths, rumors travel the roads north like carrion birds. Word has reached the dreadfort of a hidden royal ward, a symbol the resistance might rally to, and Roose Bolton is not a man who leaves symbols standing, He dispatches riders. He sends questions, dressed as courtesies, to White Harbor. He begins, methodically, to hunt. Manderley feels the net drawing tight. He orders his walls manned, his gates watched, his household purged of any tongue that might wag south. And Myrcella, no longer a lion in gilded exile, but a daughter of wolves come to claim a debt of loyalty, stands at the window once more, watching the gray water, knowing the hunters have caught her scent. What if a symbol could win a war that swords alone could not? Consider the arithmetic of loyalty in the north as winter deepens. Roose Bolton holds Winterfell, or what remains of it, a castle half burned, its towers blackened, its godswood scarred. He holds the seat, and possession of a seat is worth much in a land that respects continuity. But he does not hold hearts. He never did. He purchased them, bribed them, terrified them into stillness. And stillness is not loyalty. Stillness is only the absence of movement until movement becomes possible. Manderley understands this better than any man living. He has spent a lifetime measuring the weight of the North's grief, and he knows that grief, properly channeled, becomes an army. So the proclamation is written. It is a careful document. Every clause has been weighed. It names the Red Wedding for what it was, a violation of guest right, the oldest and most sacred law the North recognizes. It names the flaying of Northmen. It names the murder of children. And then, at the bottom, in a hand that has been schooled at Winterfell and remembers those lessons, Myrcella Baratheon sets her name. She does not claim a crown. She does not claim the North. She claims only that she witnessed the good faith of House Stark, that she was raised among them and betrayed none of them, and that she condemns the men who slaughtered the family that sheltered her. It is a small thing, a girl's signature on parchment. It is devastating, because the wavering houses, the Hornwoods, the Serwyns, the men who bent because bending kept them breathing, can now abandon the Boltons without abandoning honor. They are not turning cloak. They are answering a call issued in the name of a princess who chose the North over her own blood. The moral ground shifts beneath Roose Bolton's feet, and he feels it move, and there is nothing methodical he can do to stop it. You cannot dispatch riders to hunt down a legend once it has already ridden ahead of them. The coalition assembles as coalitions do, slowly, then all at once. Manderley's fleet brings men up the White Knife. The mountain clans descend from their heights, and they come not for a Baratheon, but for a wolf. And that distinction matters to men who count old debts in the marrow of their bones. The surviving Stark heirs become the sun around which every grievance in the North now orbits. And Myrcella rides north with them, not in a litter, not under guard, but on a horse she can manage herself, wrapped in gray and white, learning what it is to be a banner rather than a hostage. The battle, when it comes, is short. That is the thing about armies built on fear. They shatter the moment fear meets a stronger fear, or a stronger love. The Bolton bannermen look across the field and see their own kin arrayed against them, see the direwolf that their grandfathers followed, and the calculus reverses itself in an instant. A house here lowers its spears, a house there turns them entirely. Roose Bolton, who trusted numbers, discovers that numbers mean nothing when the men holding them no longer wish to hold them. The line does not break, it dissolves. Ramsay does not dissolve. Ramsay fights, because Ramsay knows precisely what awaits a man of his reputation should he be taken alive, and so he chooses the desperate courage of the cornered animal. It does not save him. The North has a long memory and a longer patience for cruelty repaid. And what is done to Ramsay Bolton in the ruined yard of the castle he stole is not recorded in these words, only that it is thorough, and that the men who do it do not flinch, and that when it is finished, the Bolton name is spoken nowhere in the North except as a warning to children. And then the gates of Winterfell open. Myrcella rides through them slowly. She has imagined this moment for years in the long dark of exile, and imagination is always kinder than truth. The castle she fled was whole. This one is wounded. The great hall stands roofless in places, the stones smoke-stained, the courtyard churned to frozen mud and worse. And yet, the walls stand. The godswood endures, its heart tree pale and watching. The wolves have come home to a ruin, but ruins can be rebuilt, and there is more life in this broken castle than there ever was in the gilded halls she was born to. She dismounts. Her boots touch the ground she once ran across as a child, and something in her chest that has been clenched for years finally, quietly, releases. They are waiting for her. The younger Starks, grown lean and hard and older than their years, survivors who learned in scattered places what it costs to endure. And Bran who went beyond the wall a broken boy and returned as something else, something that sees the turning of the world through eyes that are and are not entirely his own. He looks at Myrcella as she approaches, and he does not see a Baratheon, and he does not see a hostage, and he does not even see only the girl who once shared his home. He sees all of her at once, every choice, every road not taken, and he smiles, faintly, the way a person smiles when they already know the ending of a story they are only now beginning to tell. "You kept faith," he says. "We knew you would." And Myrcella opens her mouth to answer and finds that the words will not come. What happens to a lion when the pride devours itself? Consider the mechanism of it, the slow collapse of a house that mistook cruelty for strength and fear for loyalty. In the South, Cersei Lannister sits upon a throne that has become a prison, and she does not know it yet. Or perhaps she knows it and cannot bear to say the words aloud even to herself. Every alliance she made was made through leverage. Every leverage decays. She has burned bridges she did not know she would need, executed men whose sons now command armies, humiliated houses whose daughters now whisper in the ears of her enemies. She built her power on the principle that everyone can be broken, and she was right. She simply forgot that she was included in the everyone. The news reaches her in fragments, as such news always does. Myrcella lives. Myrcella lives, and she lives in the North, and she does not come home. Each of these facts lands like a separate blow, and Cersei absorbs them, the way a wall absorbs the sea, not all at once, but grain by grain, until something that seemed permanent gives way. She had grieved for a daughter she believed dead. She had wept in the privacy where no one could weaponize her tears. And now to learn that the grief was misplaced, that the girl breathes and walks and speaks, and that she does so in the halls of the very people Cersei has spent her life teaching Myrcella to distrust. This is a wound of a different kind. It is the wound of a mother who discovers that the child she was mourning has chosen, freely and with open eyes, to be lost to her. So she sends an envoy. It is the last card in a hand that holds almost nothing, and she plays it because she does not know how to fold. The rider carries a letter sealed in gold and threat, and something desperate beneath both. a demand phrased as a summons that carries no army behind it, and both of them know it. The envoy travels the long roads north through country that no longer answers to a Lannister name. He arrives at Winterfell diminished, a man carrying words for a queen whose crown is slipping, and he is received with the cold courtesy the North reserves for those it no longer fears. Myrcella reads the letter alone. This is the choice she makes: not to have it read to her, not to hear it filtered through other voices, but to face her mother's handwriting in the silence of a room where no one can see her face. And her mother's handwriting has changed. It is smaller now, tighter, the hand of someone whose control is fracturing at the edges. "Come home," it says, in the words beneath the words. Come home, before there is nothing left to come home to. And Myrcella understands, reading it, that the woman who wrote this letter is not writing to reclaim an heir. She is writing to be forgiven. She is writing to hear, one final time, that she was loved by something she did not have to threaten into loving her. Myrcella does not give her that. This is the cruelty and the mercy of it both, and she knows the difference even as she chooses. She takes up her own pen. She writes a reply, and she writes it not in secret, but in the full knowledge that it will be read aloud in the halls of the North, that it will pass from mouth to mouth until it becomes a thing larger than herself. She refuses to return. She says it plainly, without the ornamentation that Southern courtesy would demand. And then she says more. She names the crimes committed in the Lannister name, the murders, the betrayals, the slow poisoning of a realm that had trusted the peace her family swore to keep. She denounces them, not as a stranger might, but as one who carries the blood and rejects the inheritance. She declares herself a ward of the North. She declares herself, in words that will echo, an adopted daughter of the house that took her in when she was a hostage and made of her a kinswoman. The letter is read in the great hall, and when it is finished, there is a silence that is not empty but full of the recognition that something has shifted permanently, that a chain forged years ago as a leash has become, through the strange alchemy of kindness answered by loyalty, the very thing that binds the North together. The lion raised among wolves has chosen the pack, not out of weakness, not out of captivity, out of the clear-eyed knowledge of who showed her mercy and who showed her only use. And so the last claim falls away. The Lannister cause, already bleeding from 100 self-inflicted wounds, loses the one thing that might have given it purchase in the North, the child it could have named as bridge, as heir, as instrument. She is gone from them now, gone in a way no army could have taken her. The North stands independent, self-governing, restored to Stark hands, and Myrcella's defection stands as its proof and its promise both. But in the South, the envoy's return will bring the letter to Cersei's own hands, and no one yet knows what a cornered lioness does when she learns that the last thing she loved has learned to love someone else. The rider is already on the road, and in her solar, Cersei waits, not knowing that the answer she demanded is already riding toward her, sealed and cold and final. What does a household do with a girl it once received as hostage and came, through years of shared hardship, to receive as kin? The answer arrives not with ceremony, but with quiet certainty, the way the deepest decisions always do in the North. There is no grand pronouncement, no need for one. The surviving Starks gather in the great hall beneath the carved faces of their ancestors, and they speak the words that make Myrcella Baratheon a daughter of their house, not by conquest, not by treaty, but by the slow accumulation of trust that no war ever earned and no army ever seized. The lion cub who came north, frightened and small, is offered a place at the hearth she has already warmed for years. She does not weep. She has done her weeping long ago, in another life, when she was still learning what it meant to be safe. Consider the shape of the promise that binds it all together. Years earlier, in a moment scarcely remembered by those who witnessed it, a young king spoke a vow to a captive girl that she would wed of her own will, that no man would trade her body for advantage, that she would never be the currency her mother had made of everyone around her. Robb Stark is gone now, but his word endures, carried forward by those who loved him, and so the betrothal that comes is not arranged over her head like a blade. It is offered to her, laid open before her, and she is asked. She chooses House Manderly, the great southern-blooded house of White Harbor, merchant lords whose loyalty to the Starks never wavered even in the darkest years. She chooses them because they are steady, because their walls are strong and their harbor busy and their people kind, because a girl who was once a piece on someone else's board wishes, above all, to belong to something that will not gamble her away. The paradox is worth pausing over. The very quality that once marked Myrcella as lesser in the eyes of her own blood, her gentleness, her instinct toward mercy rather than dominion, the softness her brother mocked and her mother distrusted, becomes, in the north, her greatest instrument. She rides to the burned holdfasts. She walks among the ash of villages torched in the fighting, and she does not flinch from the grief there. She listens. She learns the names of the dead. She sits with fractured houses whose feuds predate her birth and, with patience no southern schemer could have counterfeited, she finds the small openings through which reconciliation might pass. Where Joffrey would have decreed, where Cersei would have threatened, Myrcella asks, and remembers, and returns. The small folk drifting back to their ruined fields find that someone has arranged for seed grain, for timber, for the mending of wells before the sowing season. They do not always know whose hand ordered it, but the hand is hers. This is the thing the game never accounted for. Power was always understood in the South as leverage, as the capacity to compel, to punish, to bind others through fear or need. But the North teaches a different arithmetic. It teaches that loyalty freely given outlasts loyalty extracted, that a people rebuild faster for a ruler they trust than for one they dread, that the slow labor of healing knits a realm more durably than any conquest. Myrcella becomes fluent in this northern language of governance without ever quite noticing she has learned it. She is no longer performing the role of a princess. She is simply living as a woman of the North lives, accountable, present, bound by ties she chose and cannot imagine unchoosing. In the South, the realm's ledgers still name her. To the maesters recording the war's aftermath, she is Robert Baratheon's daughter, the last legitimate-seeming issue of a dead king, or else Cersei Lannister's child, the golden fruit of a house brought low. History, when it is written by those far away, prefers such tidy labels. But history closer to the ground remembers something the ledgers cannot capture. It remembers a single decision, the choice to send one frightened girl north rather than east, to place her among wolves rather than among the strangers her mother would have preferred. Everything turned on that. Everything. The final image comes in the pale light of the first thaw, when the long winter at last loosens its grip and water begins to move again beneath the ice. Myrcella stands upon the rebuilt walls of Winterfell, the stone still raw and new in places where fire once ate through the old. Beside her stand the Stark heirs, the last of the old blood, the family that took her in and made her theirs. Below them, the yard bustles with the ordinary business of a keep coming back to life. Beyond the walls, the fields lie waiting, dark and ready, and the small folk move among them, and the smoke that rises now is from hearths and forges rather than from ruin. She watches the melt begin. She feels the sun, weak but returning, and she understands that she has become the thing no one intended her to be. The lion sent north as a claim, as a pledge, as an instrument of an alliance that shattered into war, became instead a daughter of Winterfell in every way that mattered. Not by blood. Blood, she learned, guarantees nothing. She became a daughter of the North by love, answered with love, by mercy repaid with belonging, by the patient proof that a person may be shaped entirely by where they are welcomed, rather than by where they were born. And in the quiet of the thaw, watching the North wake, she was, at last, exactly where she chose to be. And this brings us to the end of this alternate history. If you enjoyed exploring how events might have unfolded differently, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. We dive into new stories from the world of Westeros every single day, imagining the choices, battles, alliances, and destinies that could have completely changed the fate of the Seven Kingdoms. And if you'd like to explore even more stories, our Lorekeeper members unlock a brand new exclusive alternate history every single week. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. What do you think would have happened next? Did this version of history end better than the original? Or would you have taken the story in a completely different direction? Leave your ideas in the comments, because many of the best future stories come directly from your suggestions. Thank you so much for watching and for spending your time with me. I'll see you tomorrow with another alternate history from Westeros. Until then, peace out.